Dorman, how are you,
We're in
Misty?
school now.
Did you get married?
I got unmarried.
Oh, good. Well, how to you? So
Well, I
you,
was unmarried.
so you took your name back. So are you related to Caleb?
Yes, I am.
Is he family? Caleb, who else? Micah?
Like,
Right. I got all them guys in class. They're good kids. So far, so good. No issues. No issues. I'm Patrick's younger, older brother. Yeah, they're both Patrick and Ellie.
all my nephews.
All your family.
Yep.
All right, good to
I
know.
got a little sister coming up here. Hopefully you won't be here when she's here.
So what grade is she? Third? I'll be hold on a home. Hold on a home.
I know you're having
I'm gonna have it. All right, thanks for the heads up. See you, everyone. Come on in, how are you? Good. I'm happy, it's good to see everybody. We had a productive after-school session last night with a couple of young ladies from this class. We got some accounts taken care of, Voyager accounts. I'm going to check, hey girls, check day to day to see if your status has changed on that. But you both appear to be good to go on your registration. Have any of the other in the class done your Hudson Valley registration on Voyager?
Yes. I was doing mine on that, but something was wrong with the website.
Okay.
So
It wouldn't let me try and get you in class.
So,
it's been like that for a little bit.
so pick it up over the weekend at home. You got some time on it. It doesn't have to be done like ASAP, but we're getting to the point where I want to make sure everybody knows how to do it. If you could open up your slideshow from yesterday, we're looking at packet 2. Don't open up the one that I shared with everybody yesterday, but open up the one that we were looking at yesterday. It's packet 2. It's going to be titled Constitutional Convention, and we're up to page 8 on that packet, page 8, once you're in. Once you're in from your Google Classroom, page 8. We're going to pick up where we left off. We were discussing separation of powers. Just a reminder, you do not, how nice is that of Anna to just kind of,
Every single one.
right? So, we were talking about separation of powers. You do not have a quiz tomorrow. You do not have a quiz. You do not have an inquisitive due. They are going to be due next week. They're going to be due next week. And all right, that's going to stay there for now. Let's worry about it. 3, 6, 9. Everybody good. All right. Blake, are you causing a ruckus back there?
Just delivering some news.
All right.
Yes.
So
It was really good.
we ended yesterday talking about separation of powers and how government's divided into 3 branches, and that each branch has distinct and separate powers. And that is intentional. That is to limit the power of each branch and to make sure that each branch has specified and distinct powers. Okay? And I think we all can probably answer the question, why is it important to separate powers among different branches? I want to address that before we go on. Why is it important to separate powers among, Lizzie, the 3 branches? Yeah, so no one person or no one branch has too much power and abuses it. These are the 3 branches, and these are the seals of the 3 branches of our government. You got the seal of the president, which is the executive branch. You've got the seal of the Congress, which is the legislative branch, and you've got the seal of the Supreme Court, which is the judicial branch. The three branches, and I mentioned it was the three-branch idea was the brainchild of a French philosopher named Baron de Montesquieu, and that goes to show you also that Montesquieu, the Frenchman who devised separation of powers, it goes to show you that the Founding Fathers, when they wrote the Constitution, they relied on information that they were aware of, and they relied on thinkers and philosophers that they were aware of to create the Constitution. The Constitution wasn't created from scratch. It was a document that was created from scratch, but it was a document that was created from scratch that incorporated ideas that had existed at the time the Founding Fathers were alive. So they were picking from familiar sources, from ancient writings, from ancient Rome, ancient Greece, the writings about the Republic, and they were also relying on European thinkers from the Middle Ages and the late 1500s, 1600s, 1700s in the writing of the document. They relied on different influences to create, and separation of powers comes directly from Montesquieu, French philosopher. I think we jotted his name down yesterday. Also, another theme, again, we're talking about themes in the document, themes in the Constitution. Checks and balances. Okay? Checks and balances is going to be a major idea included in the Constitution. And when we talk checks, we're not talking about checks like writing a check for a payment. Checks meaning limits. Okay? So limits and balances, system to ensure no single branch becomes too powerful. Each branch can check the powers of the others. Each of the three branches can check or limit the power of the others. Here's how. President Biden, let's say today he signs a bill into law. Okay? Congress passed it, the House passed it, let's say they passed it with a majority, a simple majority of 235 to 200. Let's say a bill is before the House of Representatives, it's passed in the House 235 to 200, which means how many votes were cast? 235 and 200 would be what? 435. Is that the number of members in the House of Representatives? Yes, it is. 435 members in the House. It passes in the Senate. It goes from the House to the Senate. And let's say it passes in the Senate 55 to 45. That means the House passed it. That means the Senate passed it. And from there, in order for it to officially become law, what has to happen? What happens to a bill that passes in the House and then passes in the Senate? In order for that to actually become the law of the land, it's got to have this done to it by who? President had to sign it into law. So we're talking about checks and balances. Anna, I'm going to put you on the spot. President Biden today, let's say he gets a bill on his desk that passed in the House, passed in the Senate. He signs that into law. Is there a way that either the legislative branch or the judicial branch can limit the president's power when he signs a bill into law? Somebody tell me how. How can the judicial branch check or limit the power of the president if he signs a bill into law? What can the judicial branch do? What do courts do? Courts decide whether laws are what? Paley. They decide whether laws are fair, or more simply, courts decide whether laws are constitutional or legal. So what can the judicial branch do if the president signs a bill into law? What power might the court have, the Supreme Court have, to limit or check the power of the president to sign that bill into law? The court could declare a law what? Unconstitutional. Okay? What happens if that bill that I just mentioned to Anna, what happens if President Biden, and this is a big, what happens if President Biden gets a bill that passes in the House, passes in the Senate, and Biden opts to not sign it into law, which is his right as president. The president does not have to sign every law that is passed in Congress. So in effect, the president has the power to reject a law passed by Congress. What power does the Congress have to limit or check that power of the president? They can override the president's veto. The president vetoes a bill, that bill can go back to Congress, and if 2/3 of both bodies vote to support the bill, that bill would become law whether it's signed by the president or not. So laws can be passed without the president's signature, but they would have to, good job, Palin, they would have to be overridden by the Congress with a 2/3 vote. Now, a 2/3 vote in both houses is very, very difficult to reach. A 2/3 vote is very, very difficult to reach. If a vote passes with a simple majority, like 225 to, or 225 to 220, or 225 to 210, and a bill passes in the Senate by, let's say, 52 to 48, if it's that close to begin with, and the president vetoes it, there's probably not a good chance that it's going to be overridden because if that many people in the House supported it and the Senate supported it before the president didn't sign it, you would think that at least 2/3 of the House would have supported it. If they're going to support it to veto the president, they probably would have supported it before he vetoed it. Somebody tell me, who's got a calculator? You got calculators on your Chromebooks? Open up a tab and multiply 435 times 0.67. 435 times 0.67.
291.45.
All right, so 291, okay? So in the House, leave your calculators open for right now. In the House, if 292 members support a bill, and what's 2/3 of 100 in the Senate? 2/3 in the Senate is going to be what, 67? Okay? If you have at least 292 members in the House and at least 67 in the Senate that support the passing of a law, that means that if the president vetoes that bill can be overridden because they already have the 2/3 majority. Does everybody follow me? 2/3 of the House is 292, and 2/3 of the Senate is 67. Now, where the problem lies, and this is difficult, especially in a country today that's kind of split 50-50. In our country today, does anybody know what the advantage the Republicans have in the House is? Okay. Right now, the House is pretty much broken down 220, I think it's 223, to about 211 over Democrats. So these are Republicans and those are Democrats. What's the number add up to there? 223 and 211. 434. I think there's one person that they consider themselves an independent, so they don't align with either party. But what's the problem with reaching this number in the House of Representatives if you want to override a presidential veto? How is it going to be difficult to reach this number, especially given how close the number is between Democrats and Republicans in the House of Representatives? Palin. Yeah. If you only got 211 Democrats and 223 Republicans, if you've got a Democratic president who wants to reject a law, okay, that means that some Democrats and some Republicans are going to have to support that law, and it's very difficult to come up with this number of Democrats and Republicans to combine to support a law. Most laws that appear before the president are going to be kind of evenly split, unless it's a no-brainer. Let's say, and there aren't plenty of laws that are no-brainers. Let's say there was a proposed law that said Well, for example, if you are convicted of murdering a federal official, if you are convicted of murdering a federal official, somebody who works for the federal government, if you're convicted of murdering them, the death penalty will apply. And if that law came before the House of Representatives and it came before the Senate, unless a House member or a Senate member has a serious opposition just on principle to the death penalty, you can pretty much gather that the number of Democrats and Republicans that are going to support something like that are going to be kind of high. They would probably be well over 292, and in the Senate, you'd probably be well over 67. But on a lot of bills, there's going to be a split down the middle, which means it's 292 is a tough number to reach in the House, and 67 is going to be a tough number to reach in the Senate. And it's designed that way. It's designed that way, and here's why. In order to override the president's veto, the writers of the Constitution wanted to make sure that there was ample support among the people in the country to override the president's veto. In other words, they want to make sure, the founders do when they wrote the Constitution, that it wasn't just a simple majority of Americans that supported a particular law. It has to be more than a majority. In this case, we're talking 2/3, which is a 2/3 majority is a much bigger than a simple. What's a simple majority? If I describe the term a simple majority, Katie, what in any situation, what am I talking about? If we got 20 kids in class, what would a simple majority of 20 kids be?
I don't want to say more than all of them.
Half plus 1. So a simple majority in this group, you've got 9, okay? Odd number, kind of tough, but let's say we had 10. Let's say Aaron was here. A simple majority in a group of 10 would be half plus 1, 6, okay? So when we're talking laws and presidential vetoes, in order to make sure that the people are able to have a fair degree of power and that the Congress is able to have a fair degree of power and the president has a fair degree of power, the writers of the Constitution wanted to make sure that there was widespread support for a particular measure in the form of a 2/3 majority. Okay? That is why to override a presidential veto, it requires 2/3 of a majority. Checks and balances. Palin, your hand's up. What do you got?
Is there like a debate that goes on?
One more time?
Is there like a debate that goes on, like when they decide?
Yeah, when they're deciding on laws, they're debating before a vote's even taken. Yeah, we'll talk more about that as the year goes on. Absolutely, there's a debate. All right. So each branch can check or limit the powers of the other two. So, give an example. 2 years ago, 2020, before he leaves office, President Trump was impeached. He was charged with wrongdoing by a largely Democratic House of Representatives. Now, here's the beauty of this, okay? Congress is what branch of government? Legislative branch. Congress has the power to impeach, which is to charge the president with wrongdoing. They also have the power to remove the president if the president is convicted of wrongdoing. What branch is the president? Executive branch. Being checked or limited by the legislative branch is just, example is just the one that I just gave you. The legislative branch has the power to charge the president with wrongdoing, and if a 2/3 majority in the Senate convicts him, the president will be removed from office. Now, Trump was charged with wrongdoing by the House of Representatives, but he was not convicted in the Senate. They did not reach that 2/3 threshold in the Senate to remove a president from office. So that's why he continued on and he finished his term until 2021. But that is an example of the legislative branch having the power to check or limit the power of the president, the power of the executive branch. In an ideal system, each of the 3 branches is operating. Here's an important word. I want you to write this down in your notes. Each of the 3 branches are considered co-equal. Okay? Each of these three branches are considered co-equal branches of government. Now, the way the Constitution is laid out, and this is Farley talking, the way the Constitution is laid out, this is my opinion on this. Founding Fathers felt that the most important branch of government was the legislative branch because the first article of the Constitution outlines the formation and the structure of the legislative branch. I don't think they would have included the legislative branch first unless they wanted the legislative branch to appear as the most important. I'm not saying the most powerful, but they wanted the legislative branch to be the most important because the legislative branch is the part of government that makes laws and funds the other part of government. The next branch that's listed in Article 2 of the Constitution is the executive branch. So I want you to think about that for just a second. If the Constitution in Article 1, and you all have copies of the Constitution, I gave you a pack on a little booklet earlier in the year. If the legislative branch is outlined first in Article 1, and the executive branch is included in Article 2, just on our conversation the first couple of weeks of school, why might that have intentionally been done that way? Why list the lawmaking body ahead of the executive or the leader of the country and the branch that is headed by the leader of the country? Why do you think they would do that, Lizzie? Yeah, they wanted to make sure that they were not setting up the Constitution to give people the impression that the executive was the most important. Because clearly the writers of the Constitution did not want to give too much authority to one individual or one branch of government. Certainly didn't want to give it to too much authority to a president. But on the other hand, and this is kind of significant. The founders, and when I talk about the founders, everybody knows who I'm talking about when I'm saying the founders. I'm talking about the men who wrote the document, who wrote the Constitution. The founders also recognized that the president had to have more power to function, but they made sure that the president's powers could be limited by the other two branches of government. So what's genius in my mind is that they were concerned about giving somebody too much power, but they put into place a mechanism that would make sure that the president's power could be checked or limited. Okay? Could be checked or limited. For example, if, let's say China attacks New York City tonight. God forbid, I hope it doesn't happen. Let's say China attacks us. Does President Biden have the authority as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces? Does President Biden have the authority tonight, once he realizes we're attacked, does he have the authority to move men and women and material into New York City to defend the United States from China? Who says yes? He does. He's the Commander-in-Chief. He can take action, immediate action, to defend America. Who declares war on China once that attack occurs? Once China attacks us and we take action to defend ourselves, we're going to ramp it up, I'm sure, and we're going to defend ourselves even by formally declaring war. What branch of government has the responsibility under the Constitution to declare war? No. Not the executive. The decision to declare war does not rest with the president. The president cannot declare war. It is the job of the Congress, the legislative branch of government. Only the legislative branch of government can declare war. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is intentional because the Constitutional Convention writers did not want to give a president, any president, the power to willy-nilly declare war on countries if he or she so chose. The only power to declare war comes from the Congress. All right? And that's important to understand. Moving forward, all right, let's look at the executive branch, debate over the executive branch. Now, again, we're talking at the convention, at the Constitutional Convention. How is the executive branch going to be created? How to structure. The biggest question was how to structure the executive branch, how to put it together. They decided eventually, and here's the point I was just stressing, a little ahead of myself. They decided at the convention eventually, some leaders wanted multiple chief executives. Some leaders wanted to have 2, 3, or 4 different leaders, heads of state. But most people recognize that as something that really wouldn't work. Too many chiefs, they argued, could make things difficult. So what they did, they decided on a single person, a single president with significant powers, but they went to great lengths by incorporating these checks and balances into the Constitution. These ways that we could limit the power of the president. If the president gets too big for his britches, there's mechanisms in the Constitution. Here's the beauty of this document. If the president attempts to do something unconstitutional, he can be determined to be violating a law by what branch of government? If the president attempts to do something unconstitutional, he can be limited. His power can be checked by what branch? Dylan? Not the legislative. What the judicial branch determines whether laws are right or wrong, or legal or illegal. If, on the other hand, the president does something himself that violates his oath of office. Let's say the president is caught taking a bribe from another nation. Let's say President Biden is caught red-handed taking a bribe. What branch of government can institute or initiate the process for removing him from office? Not the judicial, the legislative branch, through the process of impeachment and then an impeachment vote in the United States Senate. Okay? Checks and balances. Okay? What are some of the powers of the president? Okay? We haven't talked a lot about this. We will. We'll get into it as we progress this week and next. What are some of the powers, just off the top of your heads? Katie, what power does the president have?
Signing laws.
He can sign a bill into law. Probably the most important power of a president is to sign bills into laws. The president can negotiate treaties. The president can lobby for the passage of laws. The president is a big cheerleader. When I say lobby, cheerleader. The president's a big cheerleader. If he wants a law that isn't on the books, the president can pressure Congress to do what, do you think? To pass a law, to vote on a law, absolutely. So the president can pass laws, okay? The president can serve, he serves as the person who negotiates treaties for our country, okay? The president can help negotiate treaties for our nation. They have to be approved by the Senate, but the president can help negotiate treaties. They're checked, his powers or her powers. I have a feeling at some point in your lifetime, and probably in my lifetime too if I live long enough, I have a feeling we're going to see a female president. Now, it might not be 2024, but within your lifetime, there will be a female president. And guaranteed, when that lady president arrives on the scene, she is going to face the same scrutiny and the same criticism and the same types of questions that all 46 presidents, all men, have faced before her. And that is, how do we limit the power of the president? Okay? How are the powers of the president limited? We cannot allow any president as Americans to violate or to exceed the authority that is granted them under the Constitution. So whether it's President Harris, whether it's Nikki Haley at some point in the future, whether it's whoever, if we elect a woman president, rest assured that she will face the same scrutiny and the same efforts by people to make sure that she or he does not violate the powers. When people talk about the branches of government, I'm going to throw something at you, and I want you to see, based on our last couple of days' conversations, how you answer this. The President of the United States, true or false? The President of the United States is the leader of all three branches of government. President of the United States is the leader of the legislative, President of the United States is the leader of the executive, and the President of the United States is the leader of the judicial branch of government. True or false? That is absolutely false. The President is the leader of one branch of government, the executive branch, and the President's powers are limited by the actions of the other two branches of government. Okay? Last question on this slide before we move on. Last question on this slide before we move on. How does the President do his job? Does the President work all by himself in the executive branch? Or does the President have assistants? President has a vice president, yes. Lizzie, what did you say? President has a lot of aides, a lot of assistants. What is the group of advisors called to the President that head each of the almost 35 federal agencies that are part of the executive branch? Palin. Not the closet. You're close. You're close. You're not the closet, but damn, she's close. All right, right here. Okay, not the closet, but the cabinet. All right. The President heads the cabinet. All right. I'm sorry. The President is the leader of the country, but he has a cabinet of advisors, and the federal government consists of 31, I think today, departments or agencies that basically serve as part of the executive branch. And here's the beauty of our executive branch. That cabinet is each tasked with running a particular department of the executive branch. So the President is not isolated. The President is not expected to do all the work him or herself. The President is required to surround him or herself with the best and the brightest to help accomplish the tasks that the executive branch need to establish. I'll give you an example. When our country was founded, you all should know this from the reading, how many federal departments were there under the executive branch? No, you're close though. You're moving in the right direction. There were 5. 5 departments. Okay, Treasury, Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of War, okay, and the Supreme Court, the judiciary. All right. So 5 departments has grown to 31 departments. Okay. As the size of the country's gotten bigger, we've added more departments. Mr. Farley. Yes, she is. I will put her on the phone. Miss Edgehill, you have a phone call. All right.
Wait,
So, yeah. So the federal government has grown. Federal government has grown and it's expanded as our population and as our needs have changed. What's the newest department that the United States has added to the federal executive branch?
Yeah, I can.
The newest department was
Yep, thank you.
established in
Bye.
2002. Newest department was established in 2002. Who can tell me what the newest federal department is? It was established in the aftermath of the terrorist attacks in 2001. It has absolutely something to do with terrorism, but I need the name of the department. Its initials are DHS. DHS, Department of Homeland Security. Okay? Department of Homeland Security. President Trump, to connect him to the executive branch and one of the departments. President Trump has vowed, if elected president, he is going to disband or eliminate one of the current departments under the federal government. He has said that this department is not necessary because the states, the 50 states, ultimately are responsible for the, and this is where Constitutional Convention hits the real world today. President Trump has vowed to eliminate a federal department because he feels that it is the responsibility of the 50 states to run this particular service that is afforded to all American youths. What department has
Education.
He has vowed to eliminate the Department of Education. He's got a lot of people at the federal level that support that, or excuse me, a lot of his supporters like that idea, and the reason he wants to do that is, and I see a couple of you raise your eyes, he wants to eliminate the Department of Education. No, he wants to remove education from the control of the federal government because he feels that education is more of a responsibility for state governments. Okay? Yesterday, we talked about the sharing of power between federal and state governments. What's that policy called? The sharing of power between federal and state agencies. Sharing of power between federal governments and state governments. I wrote it on the board. It's an F word. Not that F word, another one. What? Federalism. Federalism. That's right. Federalism. So every federal agency that exists today under the executive branch has not always been there. Homeland Security is one. Okay? Homeland Security is one. It's one of the newer ones. But there are about 31 agencies, and they all have a department head, and they all have large numbers of employees, and they all have a specific function of the executive branch to help with, to help the president with. All right? Let's go on to the next slide. You are all going to get, by the way, over the weekend, an alert on your, you're going to get an alert on your Google Classroom page. Tuesday next week, Tuesday next week, I am going to be, I'm leaving school a little bit early Tuesday. So Tuesday of next week, I'm going to have a video lecture prepared for you, and I want you guys to be doing that in the library. I'll have a video, so bring earbuds and have your Chromebooks in the library. Ms. Annalee can check in with her on Tuesday in the library at 1:30. All right. Let's talk about the judiciary. Judicial branch. Judiciary was established as a separate and independent branch. Under the judicial branch of government, federal judges are generally appointed for life to ensure independence from political pressures. Now, I don't mean freedom here. I mean judges are appointed for life so they do not face political pressures that pressure them into making decisions based on what politicians want them to do. Judges are tasked with deciding on the law based on the Constitution and based on legal precedent. So federal judges under our judicial branch of government are appointed for life to ensure independence from political pressures, and that even is something very controversial today. President Biden and his supporters have argued, because of some dislike with some recent Supreme Court decisions, I'm sure, President Biden has argued, as have major Democrats, argued that Supreme Court justices should face term limits, that Supreme Court justices should face maybe 10, 12, or 20 years on a term limit basis, so they can be shuffled in and out and replaced by presidents more frequently. Right now, on the Supreme Court, you've got judges, Clarence Thomas is the oldest judge, or longest serving judge on the court. He's not the oldest, but he's the longest serving. He was appointed by President Bush in 1991. He's been on the court for 33 years. He is a conservative Republican, and he has lots of decisions that he's made have angered supporters of President Biden and have angered Democrats, and they are suggesting that a law be passed to limit the amount of time justices serve on the bench. From my point of view as an American, I don't see any reason to limit the term that federal judges can serve unless that same rule is applied to Congress. Congressmen like Nancy Pelosi, congressmen who have served 30, 40, almost 50 years in some cases, if we are not going to apply term limits to our members of Congress, we should not be applying, I don't think, term limits to federal judges. I support term limits for Congress, however. I think term limits for Congress are good. I think what happens the longer elected officials remain in office, the more powerful they get, the richer they get, and the farther removed they get from their constituents, from their voters. I don't think that when the Constitution was written, that the writers of the Constitution were anticipating citizens remaining 30, 40, 50 years in Congress. A lot of the problems, God bless you, and a lot of the problems in our country.
The varsity football game is on and will take place in Glens Falls. The varsity football game will take place in Glens Falls.
A lot of the problems that our country faces today, in my view, have been caused by politicians who've been serving for 30, 40, 50 years that are still in office today. Okay? Politicians that are promising to reduce inflation today are the same politicians that 10 years ago or 20 years ago were voting for laws that caused inflation to what? To rise. So I am all for term limits, but I think they should come toward members of Congress first. The writers of the Constitution wanted people to serve in Congress and then go back to their communities. They didn't want Congress to be a lifelong proposition. They wanted members of Congress to rotate in and out to best reflect the needs of the people in their communities. I can't, just like I can't see 80-year-old people serving as president and be very comfortable with that, I don't think 90-year-old or 85-year-old members of Congress are doing, and I'm not, that might sound ageist, that might sound like prejudice, I'm showing discrimination toward people who are aging, but I want people who are young and who are equipped and who are sharp of mind and not been around for 50 years in leadership positions. I think we should rotate people in and out. You think I'm going to be teaching here until I'm 90? Why? Why? We'll close on this. Why do you think I'm not going to be teaching until I'm 90, Pam? Okay, I love you too, right? Alzheimer's, she says. Alzheimer's. I hope I don't have Alzheimer's, right? But that's probably not the main reason. If I was making $1 million a year, think about this. If I was making $1 million a year as a teacher, do you think that might give me the incentive to do all I can to stick around? Okay, I'm not making $1 million a year. Okay, so I want to retire while I still have my mind, I still have my body, and I don't have Alzheimer's. Okay, so my point is, with elected officials, would your parents, if I was a 90-year-old history teacher, and I stumbled into my classroom every day, and my memory wasn't good, and I was slow to respond to your emails, and I wasn't really sharp with you, do you think your families would be terribly excited about you having a teacher with that condition? No. Then why do we respect you, and why do we tolerate the people in elected office? Good question. See you.